Yo, we are back, Self-Funded with Spencer Sketchbook, probably for one of the most complicated subjects in all of stop loss and self-funding, the idea of the contract basis. Now, I could shoot a 30-minute video on this very subject, but for today, we're just going to cover the basics of what is a contract basis and how does it affect stop loss pricing. Here we go. Like I said, probably one of the most difficult topics to explain in all of self-funding. I was actually just joking to Nathaniel off camera. Realistically, I could make a 30-minute video on this that would have 5 pages, but I'm going to do my best to at least explain what contract basis is as succinctly as possible. Okay, so all a contract basis is that it's designating the time in which a stop-loss policy is covering claims that are incurred and when they are paid. So incurred means when did the claim happen? When did the actual event itself or the healthcare service happen? And then ultimately, when was it paid? And the assumption is the claim, and most medical claims, especially large claims, are not going to immediately be adjudicated and paid right away. So there'll be some sort of lag between when the claim was incurred and when it was paid. And so in the world of stop loss, you'll see it notated as incurred on the left side of a dash, in the paid number of months on the right side. So as an example, the most basic contract you'll see in all of stop loss is something called a 12-12. This is also referred to as an immature contract. I'll explain that in a moment. But here's what, if you're looking at a chronological timeline, here is what a 12-12 contract means. Let's look at a 1/1/2025 start date, and let's look at a 12/31/2025 end date for that stop loss policy. So what this is saying is any claim that incurs during that 365-day period and is also paid in that same 12-month or 365-day period, that policy will capture it. And I want to emphasize it has to be incurred in those 12 months, and also that claim needs to be paid in those same 12 months in order for it to qualify on that contract. So why is it immature? Well, oftentimes you'll see a 12-12 contract written in the very first year that an employer is self-funded. And so they'll write a 12-12 knowing that it's going to be a less expensive and immature contract, and they'll have to convert that contract to a different contract in year 2, which I'll explain. But it's immature because the first couple of months, there's not going to be a ton of claims due to claims lag and the fact that they're coming off a fully insured plan. And also because there's only the 12 months for the claims to ultimately be paid as well, there's not going to be as many claims naturally in that 12-month period that happen and are also paid. So it's an immature contract. And what will happen often is a claim will happen in, November or December, but won't get adjudicated or processed for another 3-4 months, and it'll fall outside of that 12-month paid period. And if they didn't have the appropriate second-year contract, then there would be a gap in coverage and there would be no coverage. So that is why it's an immature contract, because it's not really covering as much as it probably needs to cover. So that kind of contract is cheap. It looks good on paper. It compares very favorably to a fully insured option because it's kind of the most apples to apples comparison, but it does leave those gaps in coverage like I explained. Okay, so if I have gaps in coverage, I have an immature contract on a 12-12 in year 1, what do I need to do in year 2? Well, in year 2, that group needs to convert their contract basis to what's called a run-in contract, something like an 18 or more commonly, and what I would recommend, a 24-12 contract. So incurred in 24 months, but paid in 12 months. So let's look at what that actually means. So if I use that same 12-month period in year 1, 1/1/25 to 12/31/25, my 12-12 contract, in year 2, I'm going to convert that to a 24-12 contract. And so what that means, even though it's going to have a 1/1/2026 start date, it's going to look backwards 12 months for claims that did happen but did not get paid in that first 12 months. So in that example I used before, claim happens on December 20th. It's a big claim of some sort, maybe an auto accident or something like that, where it's an acute but very large claim. If it was incurred on December 20th, it's not going to be paid by the end of that first year. So what's going to probably happen, there's going to be some revisions, some negotiations, and maybe that claim gets paid in February or March of 2026. So this second contract, you've properly aligned the first and the second year contract, This second contract is looking backward for claims that did not get paid but did happen in the previous 12 months, and they will now apply to that new contract basis, assuming they're paid in that 12-month period. So this is a richer, what I'd call a mature contract. It's often referred to as a paid contract. It's going to be more expensive. There's going to be a load to convert that contract in that second year. But this is something known as a run-in contract. And so in this example, I could give you 15 more examples of different types of contracts. All I want you to understand today is contract basis means when were the claims incurred and when do they have to be paid in order to apply towards that stop-loss policy. To close the loop before we jump on this video, in that example where the claim was incurred at the end of the year in the first policy, it looked backwards in the second year and it was now paid in that second year policy. The one thing you need to know is the deductible actually resets. So if I had a $50,000 spec here, but that claim happened in the first 12 months but didn't get paid till the next 12 months, then if that person was already over spec, they have to reset their deductible for the following year. So one caveat or wrinkle you need to understand about the alignment of contracts: there's no such thing as a perfect solution, and there's not something that's going to completely cover you no matter what happens. And so there are some offsets or changes that will happen between these 2 years as well. But maybe I'll do a follow-up video and we'll do 12/18s versus the 12/12 to 24/12, and we'll talk a little bit of theory. But right now, I just want you to understand contract basis, how it applies, and if you're a consultant, you need to make sure whatever contract basis strategy you choose, that you align those contracts from year to year to make sure there's no gaps in coverage. So I'm sure there's going to be questions. I'm sure I did a terrible job of explaining this, but I want to address what a contract basis is. So if you ever hear that term in the future, you go, oh, I remember there was a video for that. Thanks for watching, guys.